As to the charge of we, the jury, find the defendant guilty. As to the charge of possession of a weapon during the commission of a violent crime, we, the jury, find the defendant guilty. Ladies and gentlemen, if this is a verdict you reached in your deliberation room and this is still your verdict now, please raise your right hand.
Zach Hughes is not guilty of the crime he was charged with if all this pans out. Miss To The Point's feeling under the weather. She was meant to do this video. She sent this clip to me. And we all know the defense has a truth, the prosecution has a truth, and the media has a truth. But more often than not, none of those align with the actual truth. This is bombshell breaking information, at least breaking to me, and certainly changes the narrative. All that being said, everything's alleged. Welcome to The Point. Let's get to it.
Well, Jen, let's talk about this a little bit. Dylan obviously adamantly convinced that this young child, the daughter of John Mello and Christina Parcell, had been. Now, prosecutors prior to the trial told us that that was not the case, that it was only photographs and videos, and that there were no acts depicted in them.
Now, the quick recap so everybody knows what's going on so far. Christina Parcell has a child with John Mello. They were in the middle of a brutal custody battle, and Christina had a boyfriend named Bradley Post. Zach Hughes has ties to this particular story through John Mello, and Zach Hughes was charged with the brutal attack of Christina Parcell in her Greer home. The quick backstory is John Mello and Zach Hughes had made claims that Christina did not provide a safe home for their daughter. There were multiple accusations and campaigns put out to make Christina and Bradley Post look bad. John Mello insisted his daughter wasn't safe around her, and at one point in time he took his daughter to Italy where she stayed for a while. Now she was ultimately brought back to the U.S., and Zach Hughes felt compelled to save John Mello's daughter. In fact, when he took the stand and he talked about what he did and why he did it, to be perfectly honest with you, I didn't find any of it believable. When the verdict came down, I told Mrs. To The Point they were absolutely right. I'm surprised it took them this long. Zach Hughes came across as cold, calculated, and non-caring. He would talk as if doing something like this was absolutely one of the hardest things to do, but he showed no emotion when he was talking about it. And we had all heard the rumors of SA going on in the home, but honestly, I didn't really think it was believable. But this is what came out through Fitz News, and Fitz News is breaking anything and everything South Carolina related. If you want the full details and the inside information on anything pertaining to this, John Paul Miller, or even Alec Murdaugh, this is the place to go. But now that we're all caught up, this is what they said.
Obviously, that's still, by my definition, but certainly it would fall into the category of the child's materials, not necessarily Jen.
Will, may I stop you there? Because there's an interesting piece of information which you didn't know, which nobody knows because this was not broadcasted. But the defense proffered testimony into the court records, which presumably we will be able to obtain once we get a transcript of this trial. But this record indicated that investigators had seen Christina digitally manipulating her child's region.
Absolutely 100% changes the narrative. If this came in at trial and I happened to be sitting on that jury, if I found this out right then and there, not guilty. And I don't believe that's a crazy take to have. I mean, if you know somebody's in danger or their life is in danger, you should want to help that individual. Now, of course, all this is an allegation, but this guy just said investigators saw that digital evidence. And if law enforcement saw that evidence and that evidence wasn't allowed at trial, that absolutely means Zach Hughes did not get a fair trial. His constitutional rights were violated. It is absolutely pertinent to this story that that information be allowed at trial if that is actually true. Now, of course, if it's rumor or hearsay and it has no bearing whatsoever, then the court got it right, but we don't know that. This guy just said investigators saw the footage. This isn't necessarily somebody outside of the case looking in who might have heard a rumor. If law enforcement saw it, it should have been allowed at trial. At least that's my take. Now, if you disagree, you can let me know down in the comments below. But with this information, I'm finding Zach Hughes not guilty. Or at the very least, a second-degree passing charge and not first-degree.
Oh, boy.
On these photos.
Jen, had you heard that?
Yeah.
Okay, well, that is the first I have heard that.
First I'm hearing it also.
Nobody heard this.
Well, and again, obviously the jury wouldn't based on the judge's order, but let's go back to the question of, we asked prosecutors that, and we're actually going to get Solicitor Walt Wilkins in the studio, or we're going to go to him next week at some point. We'll ask him about this, but we were told leading up to the trial
Now, one additional thing I found out while I was doing some reading on this particular story, Walt Whitman, the prosecutor, is actually one of these people who claim to be a champion against SA. And the irony of the situation is there was very much a potential that SA was going on inside that home. And the only way they found out about it was through this actual passing. But if they found out about it and it was still left out at trial, what does that say about Walt Whitman if all this happens to be true?
That there were no founded allegations involving the child. But Dylan, you're telling us different.
Yeah, I mean, DSS chose not to found those reports. Just because DSS wasn't incompetent doesn't mean that it wasn't happening.
Well, those were
Absolutely.
in the photos. Those were in the photos discovered after the.
Right, but I'm saying that DSS
Yes.
reasonably could have discovered that was happening just because they, by conducting a proper investigation, considering it was happening.
Conduct a proper investigation.
And let's not pretend like these services that are put in place to protect children always get it right. We know that they get it wrong sometimes. I'm not saying they're always wrong. I'm not saying they're always evil. I'm just saying they're human. If they're human, they're subject to error. So making the argument that this child protective services didn't find anything means nothing happened isn't necessarily the right argument to make. We need to know the additional details if this is all actually true.
I don't know that they
Have
didn't.
you seen their investigation? Have you talked to them? Have you spoken to the guardian ad litem?
I have not spoken with these individuals, but it was happening.
It was happening. I have asked
Well,
John
yes,
Mello on
allegedly.
numerous occasions. I mean, because he did claim this. He claimed it. He claimed it repeatedly. He claimed it with me. He claimed it with. He made these allegations with police, with DSS, with the guardian ad litem. He made them with me. I asked him for help substantiating it because this child, if she was in danger as a human,
Everybody wants to help her.
everybody wants to help. When I asked for
Absolutely.
help substantiating it, I was threatened. I was not provided with any information that would lead me to be able to file a report to substantiate these allegations.
And some additional information about John Mello, just so you're all aware. He's known to be eccentric, over the top, and a little bit extra. So it is completely believable that he would sit there and threaten this individual right here when she asked for additional information, just because that seems to be his normal reaction to anybody who questions what he says. That doesn't mean he's 100% telling a lie, but it doesn't give anybody any comfort when they're looking for the truth. There is also reportedly a whole Facebook group that is solely dedicated to John Mello and his extra over-the-top behavior. He is 100% known within that community to apparently bother everybody until he gets his way. Make threats, accuse, whatever he's got to do to get what he wants. But the big takeaway here is this. If all this is true, why wasn't it allowed at trial? That's the hugest question that still needs to be answered. Because if this stuff is known, and if this stuff could be provable, and if there are investigators out there saying, yes, we saw her do this, then that means Zach Hughes is not guilty of first degree. In fact, I don't believe Zach Hughes is guilty at all. If they went to Child Protective Services and said, hey, this is going on in the home, and Child Protective Services would do nothing about it, then what else is a father supposed to do? What else is Zach Hughes supposed to do if he's the type of person he tried to say he was on the stand? I mean, he came across cold and distant, but he has no criminal record, and there has to be a reason why he did what he did. There has to be an explanation. This new information absolutely would change everything for me if it's all found out to be true. But that's the information, and that's what Mrs. To The Point wanted to talk about. She couldn't today because she's feeling under the weather, and since she fills in for me on occasion, I figured I'd fill in for her. But if you enjoy this and a more fair, open conversation, maybe check one of these videos out. Y'all be safe now.